Welcome back to the Lights Out podcast, bedtime stories for boys and girls around the world. Good evening, boys and girls. Are you ready for bed? Are you all snuggled up and ready for another Lights Out bedtime story? Good, because you're in for a treat tonight. We have part 12 of Fing by David Williams, and this chapter is called Some Light Reading. At dawn the next morning, Mr. Mink set off on his quest to find a Fing. He had cast aside his bookish persona and had now turned himself into an adventurer. Well, sort of. The man had put his bicycle clips over the bottom of his trousers in case he snagged them on some undergrowth. Poor Mrs. Meek was very tearful at the doorstep. Since the day they were married, the pair of librarians' lovebirds had never spent a single night apart. Please be careful, father, implored Mrs. Meek. Mr. Meek was trying to be brave, though it was not his strong suit. Oh, don't you worry, mother. I will be back with a Fing before you know it. What's the absolute worst that could happen? You could get eaten, called Myrtle from an upstairs window. Oh, thank you for your contribution, my angel, sent from heaven, called father. He smiled weakly at his wife. I will do my absolute best not to. Promise, she implored. I promise. They kissed awkwardly. Their kisses were always awkward. Either their noses knocked, or chins bumped, or glasses crunched. Today, their foreheads clunked together, clunk. Ouch, oh, sorry. Mr. Meek picked up his suitcase, took a deep breath, and walked down the path. I miss you already, called Mrs. Meek. Yucky, yuck, came a cry from upstairs. Mr. Meek blew a kiss back to his wife, which, fumbling, she caught. Move your bottom, shouted Myrtle. Father picked up the pace and, with his suitcase in hand, began walking to the bus stop. His socks and sandals, shirt, tie, slacks, and tweed blazers, he looked nothing like a jungle explorer. Having never left his local town before, he was woefully unprepared. The only food he'd brought was a packed lunch that Mother had made him, consisting of a bread sandwich. Father didn't like fillings, so they were distracting. A packet of flavourless crisps. No flavours, please, thank you kindly. A plain yoghurt, just as he liked them. As is often that way with packed lunches, Father had scoffed the lot within 5 minutes of setting off from home, sitting on the bus to the airport. Soon after, he came cataclysmically hungry and resorted to eating the plastic box in which the lunch had been packed. He ended up rather liking the taste, as there was none. In his suitcase, Mr. Meek had packed an anorak in case of rain, a spare pair of underpants and socks. He'd also bought some light reading, a small selection of his favourite books from home, a history of cauliflower, boring buildings of Britain, ponds, a closer look at gravel, tissues around the world, 101 poems about leaves, a spotter's guide to sandals, church pews through the ages, a million times tables, light bulbs, and more light bulbs. Plus, he had taken out of the library the book that had led him on his quest, the Monsterpedia. It was wriggling around in his suitcase. He just had to remember to return it within 2 weeks, or there would be a hefty fine to pay. Of course, Mr. Meek had made some room for the most important item of all, the special Fing capturing equipment. First, a rusty old hamster's cage that he'd found up in the loft, into which he put the Fing. Second, a giant tin of the Fing's favourite food, custard cream biscuits. These were to lay a trail to tempt the Fing into the hamster's cage as soon as it had spotted one. Mr. Meek's plan really was that simple. How could it possibly go wrong? The end of chapter 12 of Fing by David Williams. The next one is part 3. The deepest, darkest, jungliest jungle. Wow. There we go. Fing by David Williams. Here on the Lights Out podcast. Bedtime stories for boys and girls around the world. Good night.